Hey everyone, welcome to RotoGrinders and welcome to the SuperDraft lineup building show. I'm Stevie TPFL here to build some NFL lineups for week 6. Yes, week 6. We are officially getting to that 33% mark on the season. Grant, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Just ready for this show again. I keep coming close to taking down the SuperDraft GPP, and I just still haven't. I've gotten multiple top 10 finishes without finishing first overall, but I kind of like what they did this week. Even though they dropped down the GPP field, it's a flatter payout structure, which is what I prefer. It's only 10% up top, and it's 25% of people cash. So, yeah, excited for the show. Excited to go over some SuperDraft stuff, assuming that we're going to be on the same stuff.
Yeah, I kind of did some research here a little while ago and looked at some of the, we'll call it pricing, but it's multipliers on SuperDraft. And I feel like there's some standout people this week. Last week we highlighted Will Fuller on the show as a standout, multiplier. Patting ourselves on the back for that one. Don't always get it right, but we got that one right. So I'm thinking that we're going to be talking about some of the guys at least, a little bit here. So excited. If you guys haven't checked out SuperDraft, head on over to superdraft.io. Sign up using the RotoGrinders code, which is grinders. You get $10 once you make your first deposit over $10 or more. So get the free money. Take advantage of it. $10 is $10. You deposit $10, you get $10. You can play the $20 tournament and turn that into some money. So, yes, it has been overlaying a ton. It's been kind of like a double up. So, excited to see what happens this week. I like the flatter payout structure as well. If it's not $1 million up top, make it flat, right? Like that's how I look at things. Like if I'm not chasing that big time $1 million payout or anything like that, like I'm perfectly fine with having a flat payout structure.
Yeah, and I mean, I like it too because I throw in I've maxed out every single week so far this season over on SuperDraft just because it's been one of the best places to play. So flatter payout structure. If I'm not getting first, then I get pissed off if I do really well, but I only end up breaking even. So if they had this structure the entire season long, the fact that I haven't gotten first, I would have been absolutely crushing, and now I'm instead of just doing very well.
So yeah, if you guys have any questions for week 6 about SuperDraft, throw them in chat. We'll answer them as we're going here. We're going to start like we do every week. It's Wednesday. We're building a cash lineup that can change a ton. There's a ton of injury news that we're waiting on this week. Like we're waiting on Tyreek Hill. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? David Johnson. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Just a couple off the top of my head. But, it's a week that a Wednesday cash lineup is probably not what you're going to end up on Sunday, but it gives you guys a good idea and maybe a starting point here. So let's get started, as always, at the quarterback position. First and foremost, we always tend to start here at the 1 to 1.3 multipliers. So pretty much everybody from Mahomes to Wentz. These guys are your studs. When you're looking at quarterback, these guys are your studs. Are any of these guys cash game playable for you this week?
Between 1 and 1.3, I mean, the only guy that might be is Mahomes. Even though he's just a 1x multiplier, he's still Patrick Mahomes. I do worry a little bit about that ankle injury, but it's the fact that they've kind of tightened up QB pricing. Like Mahomes getting that extra 2-point bonus for going over 300 passing yards, which I can't remember the last time he didn't. You're getting between 20 and 30 points, maybe 40 points every single week. He'd be the one guy that I'd think about in this 1 to 1.3x range, but I think the better moves are in the 1.3 to 1.4x range.
Yeah, I think Kyler Murray is probably the guy that I'm looking at cash games right now. Getting that 1.35 seems really nice. Facing an Atlanta defense, allowing the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks. David Johnson banged up. Like, talk me off of Kyler Murray here in cash games.
I can't. It's going up against Atlanta. Kyler Murray puts up big numbers nearly every single week here. I mean, just look at what he's done so far this season. And even though the passing touchdowns really haven't been there, I mean, he's only got 4 passing touchdowns on the entire season. And yet he's still putting up close to 20 points every single week. You get the multiplier on there and the best matchup he's had all season like maybe a better matchup than the Bengals just because they aren't going to be running the ball nearly as much. So if Kirk's back, that definitely gives him some more upside. He has rushing yards upside, rushing touchdown upside. Like, yeah, Murray's my favorite guy on the board.
Yeah, ran the ball, 6 total times in the first 2 games. And then, obviously we've seen him run the ball, a lot more, over 8 times in 2 of the last 3 games. So we're starting to see what we saw and what everybody was so excited about just in general here when it came to Murray. Outside of Murray, I think that this is a potential spot that Baker Mayfield could get it going. A lot of people are down on him, but I think he's probably a guy that I would play more in tournaments instead of, cash games here. So, I think Kyler Murray, I prefer him over Mayfield, but in tournaments, I think Mayfield's an interesting pivot, and we can talk about him maybe more when we get into a tournament build. But Grant, is there anybody here on this multiplier like 1.4 plus that you would consider playing over Murray in cash games? And we'll revisit quarterbacks here in a minute when we get back to tournaments.
I mean, the only guy that I would even consider is going to be Uncle Rico. Minshew going up against New Orleans. Guys been picking up big numbers. We saw last week him actually go over 300 passing yards, put up 23 points. This isn't the worst matchup in the world, and he's good. And I really just like that multiplier. And this one's going to sound ridiculous, but you know who I have a lot of interest in?
I bet you I can guess.
Go ahead.
Case Keenum.
Case Keenum is the answer. Yeah, you must have saw my tweet earlier.
No, I know you. I work with you so much, and I know that we are tentatively thinking alike, and like that whole game on SuperDraft is interesting, and we'll talk about it as we're going here.
Oh yeah, no, it's beautiful. I mean, so I was looking at DVOA earlier, and the Dolphins are literally twice as bad for pass defense as any other team in the entire NFL, pretty much. They are dead last, and by a large margin. I know that Washington really isn't great, but we saw the connection that McLaren has with Case Keenum. We've seen Case Keenum go over 300 passing yards twice so far this season. One was against Philly, who has a better pass defense than Miami. One was against Chicago, and Chicago's a great defense. Granted, there was a lot of garbage time stuff there. They are a favorite, which worries me, and they want to establish the run more. But Case Keenum's still, I think, completing close to 65% of his passes on the season here. He has weapons that he likes in this offense, and he's the best quarterback of the bunch there going up against the worst defense in the league. So, I'm super excited. I don't think he's going to go heavily owned. I hope that he plays because I haven't been this excited about a quarterback all season long.
Both the quarterbacks in this game, technically, like game stacks of this game, like I don't even hate Rosen on the other side. But yeah, there's not a lot that I'm like really liking down here this week. So Case Keenum, like you said, makes a ton of sense. I think, another guy you could potentially look at is like a Joe Flacco, just for volume alone. Like they're throwing the ball a lot, like 33.5 times per game this season. So I don't hate that idea. I don't hate a Marcus Mariota because like he has the rushing touchdown like upside. So if he gets one rushing touchdown at 1.5, like you're probably looking at 10 points from rushing alone. So, but that's more tournament stuff. Let's throw in Murray. I think we both agree that Murray's our cash game guy here on Wednesday. All right, let's go over to running back. Running back's been a position recently on SuperDraft that you kind of pay up for. Like Christian McCaffrey, you pretty much had to have him last week on SuperDraft, and he was a 1x guy. Is there anybody in this so anywhere from Cook to Chubb, 1 to 1.3x multipliers here that you're considering for cash games at running back this week at a position that we don't have a Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, no, I don't know if there's anyone I'm considering in the 1 to 1.1x. Like the top 3 guys all have bits and pieces of them in tournaments, but for cash, I don't think that they're the right call. For me, if you're going all the way up to Chubb, it's Chubb and Fournette. Both those guys, we know that Fournette's getting just a massive target share, that he's getting all the rushing yards. The volume is there, and that extra 0.2x multiplier is pretty massive when you can all things considered here. So Fournette and Chubb is another guy that I'd look at as a potential guy in cash. The 1.3x multiplier is good. This game's projected to be close. He's going to be rushing the ball. He's one of the best running backs in the league. He has that 100-yard rushing upside. Like, Chubb's a guy that I'm definitely looking for in cash, and he's probably maybe my second or third option in cash, but he's definitely a very viable option for all formats.
Yeah, Nick Chubb is a guy that I really like. I don't mind Fournette. Depends on what happens with the Baltimore situation. If Ingram's going to play, if he doesn't play, obviously that's going to open up a lot. Running back, we could potentially see like two very good multiplier running backs open up with Arizona's David Johnson and Mark Ingram both being questionable heading in. So, looking at this, like, I think Chubb is a guy that, you have to like here at 1.3. Scrolling down a little bit, I think you have to like Chris Carson at 1.4 going up against Cleveland. We saw whatever running back wanted to do whatever they wanted against Cleveland last week, whether it be Coleman or Breida, even Mozart. Like, this team's allowing the 10th most running back points fantasy-wise. So Chris Carson, the volume has been there the last couple games. They want to get him involved. Wilson loves this guy. And then the other guy that I like here, Grant, is Le'Veon Bell, 1.45x multiplier. Sam Darnold is going to be back this week, which, people might think is a downgrade, but it has to be an upgrade, right?
Yeah, I don't think anyone thinks it's a downgrade. Some people might think it's even, but no one thinks it's a downgrade.
No, I meant more like just in general, the Jets
Bell.
stink.
Yeah, the Jets are just absolute trash, but Darnold's definitely an upgrade. He's almost close to a league average quarterback, and he's going to give a large amount of volume to Le'Veon Bell. I mean, anytime you get a guy at 1.45x, regardless of position, where he's potentially going to get 10 targets, you just roll with it. And we have him. He's gotten 0 touchdowns since week 1. And he's still put up an average of about 12 points. So a 1.5x multiplier, that's 17 points. It's probably close to your floor, and ceiling, if he gets 2 touchdowns, is just through the roof here. I think that he's the top cash game play on the board here at the running back position. So he's the guy that I go with. Other guys, that range, I already mentioned Chris Carson. I don't hate Gurley just because of his multiplier. On the off chance that he does get 2 touchdowns, which we saw last week, can always happen with him. He's always a guy that now he's getting the red zone role here. So he's had 2 touchdowns each of the last 2 weeks, even though 2 weeks ago he only had 5 rushing attempts. So he's a guy that I'm definitely looking at too. But that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, you got to remember too, Gurley's playing 77% of the snaps. As much as we want to hate on Todd Gurley, this is not a site that I'm paying premium price for him. We can hate on Todd Gurley when he's premium price on any site. But on a site like this where I'm not paying that premium, I think that, we could potentially look at him. Scrolling down a little bit, Joe Mixon's a high volume guy. He's a 1.55x multiplier going up against Baltimore. This defense has not been good this year. Since the offense has been terrible, I think that's kind of the counterpoint. But I think Mixon's a guy that he's disappointed this year. Let's just, say it as what we want to say it. This whole team in general. Going into Baltimore, 1.55x multiplier. Is he a guy that you're considering here?
Yeah, maybe for tournaments. I mean, there's a few guys that have big enough multipliers where if they get into the end zone, which is absolutely a possibility for Mixon, are great plays. We got Mixon. We got Chris Thompson at 1.6x. We got Carlos Hyde, who I don't want to play at all. I ended up playing a lot of them last week. The touchdown definitely saved my butt there. And then Kenyon Drake, where the game script, this is the first almost positive game script he has all season long, where they are expected to be close. They're going up against a trash defense, 1.75x multiplier. And then Royce Freeman and Philip Lindsay, both those guys, either one of them can do something. Freeman has a better multiplier. Lindsay is clearly the better back. And a guy that I've played every single week this season and is sneakily probably going to be low owned again for no apparent reason.
So, Grant, one of my favorite plays this week is Kenyon Drake. Sticking to this theme of this Miami-Washington game in general. On DFS, on salary cap DFS sites, I think these guys are somewhat still risky. But on a site like this, Kenyon Drake is a starting running back that gets starting running back work. And he's 1.75 facing one of the worst defenses in football. Miami stinks. I'm a Dolphins fan. Our team stinks. I'm not sugarcoating it at all. The team's terrible. I hope they lose every game. Kenyon Drake is 1.75. If he gets 15 normal points here, probably going to have to score a touchdown to get there. He is going to crush in this type of format.
Yeah, no, right there with you. Like the most rushing attempts he's got so far this season is, I think, 12. Still heavily involved in the pass game, though. We'll get 5 or 6 targets, probably 3 to 5 receptions. And this game script favors him to get 15-plus touches against a horrible defense. They generally aren't within 15 points of another team. So this is a spot where they're 3.5-point dogs. They're playing at home, which definitely helps. And Drake is talented. Really like him. And honestly, don't hate Adrian Peterson. About the same if they do decide to establish the run, which who knows. But yeah, I mean, this is a perfect, if you think they're going to run the ball, this is a perfect running back game stack.
Yes, especially on this site. All right, and like we kind of already talked about, Edmonds would be very much in play if David Johnson doesn't play at 1.75. He'd be kind of a chalky option there. And if we get news that Ingram's not going to play, Gus Edwards is 1.85, and I think Justice Hill is 2x. Grant, what do we want to do here for our second running back? We have Le'Veon Bell in here. Who do we want to shore up on this team?
I think it's Gurley. Gurley or Chubb are the two guys. I mean, the 1.4 and 1.5 or 1.3x multipliers are a little bit too much. I mean, either them or Carson are all fine options. I think my preference is probably Gurley then Chubb.
All right, I'll let you have Gurley. I took Bell, so we'll work in Gurley here. Going over to wide receiver. You know, obviously, wide receiver, I talk about this every week. Wide receiver is the position that I like to look for the multipliers. I like to look for those guys that if I don't get a touchdown out of somebody, I can make it up with the multiplier. So starting here at the top, you know, I think Michael Thomas coming off a big game. Jalen Ramsey probably doubtful to play this week again. Julio Jones coming off of an awful game. Cooper in a really good matchup against bad corners. I don't like playing him against elite corners. And then Cooper Kupp, who just has massive volume. The guy that you wouldn't expect to be here is Chark. You know, he's not a guy that you're paying premium most places for, but you're paying a premium for him here. What do you think of these top wide receivers?
I don't want to use any of them, really, in the 1 to 1.2 range. Michael Thomas would be the one guy I consider just because of his volume, or maybe Julio Jones if I really want because he's still a guy that has 30-point potential in any game. So I'm fine with both of them, but I'm probably fading all the guys in the 1 to 1.2x multiplier range. The first guy I'm really looking at is Hopkins. 1.25x for a guy that beginning of the season was going to be the top overall wide receiver, we all thought. He hasn't been great so far this season. Like, he's still getting a decent amount of volume. He's going up against KC. They're going to be probably playing from behind. They're going to be throwing the ball a whole lot. KC can give up some points. Hopkins is my number one overall guy in terms of multiplier and projected points over on SuperDraft, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Yeah, he was the guy that I was hoping that you were going to mention. Love him. He's a cash game staple. He's a tournament staple for me this week. Eventually, the touchdowns are going to happen, right? Like this game screams shootout in general with these two quarterbacks. So you have to think Hopkins at 1.25. The other guy that's in this range is Odell Beckham. I already said it. Like, you know, this is a guy that everybody's down on Cleveland. I think San Francisco has a really good defense in general, and watching them on Monday night, like the defense was very impressive. Getting Cleveland coming back home. It's a 1:00 game, Seattle traveling across country, kind of, I guess. But this is a spot that I really like Odell Beckham at 1.3. And I like Tyler Lockett, same game, 1.35. You know, these are the guys, these multipliers, once I start getting into this 1.3 range, and like Odell Beckham's cheap pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of right there with you. I think I have a slight preference to OBJ over Lockett. Still like Hopkins more than both of them, but I mean, you got to play 3 to 4 wide receivers. So OBJ is one of the top options. For cash, I don't mind that at all. He should get a decent amount of volume here. The Seattle defense isn't nearly as good as people seem to think it is based on how they've been in the past. And people forget that Sherman's still a lockdown cornerback. I need to rewatch the game and see how much like he was on OBJ, but I'm guessing the majority of the game here. OBJ is a great play. Really like that. And if you want to pivot from McLovin, why 1.4x outside of the week where he got injured and the week he didn't play, obviously. McLovin's been, I'm talking about McLaren. I just like the McLovin nickname. He's been fantastic. He gets Case Keenum back, and 1.4x multiplier, guy that's averaged about 16 points with Keenum, 17 points with Keenum. 1.4x massive.
Yeah, I don't hate McLaurin. I think he's very much in play. Miami's terrible. Again, their defense is terrible. Going to be very low owned in tournaments, I would think. Like if I had to guess here, just looking at this range, Fitz, Lockett, all these guys right here. Will Fuller coming off a big game. Obviously, we got to see if Sammy Watkins is going to play or not. That's going to open up some value. Kind of scrolling down here a little bit more. Is there anybody in this 1.45 to 1.6 range that you like?
Yeah, there's a few guys. Sutton, 1.45. Not a terrible play. He's been crushing it all season long. People still don't play him. Woods, Diggs, Jeffrey, all guys that have a ton of talent. If they get volume, they can absolutely crush their value. Same thing with Sanders. If Kirk plays like him, Sanu, he's 1.6 going up against Arizona, who has actually been decent to outside wide receivers. But Sanu's 1.6x, Metcalf 1.6x, D.D. Westbrook 1.6x. Like there's a lot of good plays, but nothing fantastic like until you get to Miami, which is more of a tournament stuff. Parker and Williams, both 1.75x. I really like them.
I like Emmanuel Sanders a lot here at 1.55. He's a guy that, we can kind of trust that he's going to get targets. Sutton had a big game last time out, and I think that could potentially scare people off of Sanders. Like Sanders had a 5% target share last week, and Sutton had a 37% target share. And on the season, it's like 24 to 21. So I'm not too concerned about week 5, and I think that, we can kind of trust Emmanuel Sanders. Stephon Diggs at 1.5. Thielen's been the guy in this offense, but Diggs has a good matchup here. Philly, they've allowed a lot on the deep ball, and I feel like Diggs has a more upside when it comes to that. Kirk is going to be back. He's 1.6x. Well, it sounds like Kirk's going to be back. He's 1.6. Everybody is gravitating to DJ Chark. Is this a spot maybe we look at D.D. Westbrook?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just based on the multiplier alone, Chark has been fantastic, but D.D. did have 11 targets last week. He's had 4 straight games with 4+ targets or 5+ targets, if I remember correctly. So he's definitely entrenched in his offense and still has the upside to get a touchdown. He still doesn't have one of the season. Chark is getting one every single game, so people are going to likely overlook D.D. But, I mean, touchdown equity, it shouldn't be this drastic of a disparity between Chark and D.D. So D.D. getting a much higher multiplier, I think he's a fantastic play.
Yeah, we're just going to kind of keep going over wide receivers here, and we'll plug in these last 2 spots here in a second. Hardman, obviously, if Watkins doesn't play, he'd be very much in play here. Nelson Aguilar is really, really interesting this week because we know that Xavier Rhodes is going to shadow Alshon Jeffrey, and Rhodes is hit or miss this season, it seems like, but, you have to respect the talent of Xavier Rhodes. So Nelson Aguilar is interesting there. You talked about the Miami guys, Parker and Williams, both very much in play here at 1.75, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you can even bring it back with Richardson if you really want to. If you're going to play Rosen, if Rosen goes for 300 yards, which is not out of the realm of possibility, Washington is a trash defense. They're going to be playing from slightly behind, but they're not going to be forced to try and put up boatloads of points. Parker and Williams can each end up with a big game or big enough with a 1.7 multiplier. I'm not going to be surprised if either of them get 100 yards and a touchdown. I mean, Williams, look at him throughout the entire season, and he has been the main guy. So I really like both these guys in play. And like I said, all he has to do is get 100 yards, and he's more than crushed value.
Anybody else down here, Grant? Like Tate was last week's value play that everybody talked about. probably going to be very low owned here, and targets were okay. Anybody else down here that you want to mention before we move on and plug these two spots in?
Tate, and I don't like it, but either of the main Jets wide receivers, Crowder and Robbie Anderson, both are sitting there at 2x multipliers. They're not good. This offense is not good, but it'll take an upgrade now with Darnold back in. We know that Robbie Anderson can go for a 50-yard bomb, 60-yard bomb at any given time. At 2x, like that's what you're searching for. As soon as someone gets a big catch for a touchdown, at 2x, they've already crushed value. So if you really want to, you can go off the board and go with them, but not terribly excited about it.
Yeah, I'd be excited about Crowder. I feel like more than Anderson, just because Sam Darnold likes to throw to the slot guy. I think, was it like 17 or 15 targets or something like that in week one? Yeah, for Crowder. So this is the week that I feel like Crowder is going to be one of those value plays that I'm playing a bunch on other sites. So I like the fact that he's 2x here. Yeah, he had 17 targets, 14 catches for 99 yards. So there you go. All right, so let's plug in two guys here for our cash build. We have Hopkins. Do we want to go like Beckham and then maybe one of these higher multiplier guys?
I don't know how high we need to go with the next multiplier guy. I think Sutton's probably the best option, or Woods. Guys that we know that are going to get enough volume. Like going with the 2X guys is probably going to be a little bit tough and a little bit risky. But Woods has gotten, 8+ targets in the majority of the games this season. He's had as much as 13. They are showing that they're going to pass the ball a decent amount. So I'd go with either Sutton or Woods and get those guaranteed target shares with a high enough multiplier where it really gives you a high floor and a high ceiling.
Yeah, so let's go. We'll go Woods, Beckham here. So we got Hopkins, Woods, Beckham. We're not taking we obviously will take some of these Dolphins guys and stuff when it comes to tournaments this week. But Robert Woods, remember, SuperDraft is half-point PPR. Like, they do give you some bonuses if you get the 100 yards receiving and 300 yards passing and stuff. But you got to remember it's a half-point PPR, so it's still kind of touchdown dependent. And Robert Woods is always a guy that's a candidate to have a big touchdown game. So tight end this week, obviously, like in general here, these top tight ends are the top tight ends. But when I opened up SuperDraft, Grant, I was very shocked to see George Kittle at 1.35, where all the other stud tight ends are in that 1 to 1.25.
Yeah, that's just silly multiplier. I don't understand it at all. I mean, I get that it's probably a Monday Night Football thing, and he wasn't great the first 3 weeks of the season. Finally had some positive regression last week going up against Cleveland. Gets a matchup this week against the Rams. It's not terrible. Kittle is just my top overall play at tight end. The only guy within a little bit of him is going to be Delaney Walker, just because that 1.7 multiplier, but he's been trash the last 2 weeks. So it's Kittle by a mile for tight end.
Yeah, you're getting a guy that has over 8 targets in 3 or 4 games this season at a multiplier that you can really take advantage of. If he doesn't find the end zone, we're probably still – he's had at least 6 catches in 3 games this season. They've only played 4, and one of them was Cincinnati, and all they had to do was run the ball in that game because they destroyed the Bengals. So going to LA here, this is a big game for both of these teams. I expect George Kittle 8 to 10 targets in this game. He's clearly the cash game play. Now, the other side of this game, Everett became very involved last week. It's a 1-week sample. How do we elect, how does that affect how you build here? I guess it's 2 weeks, really, because he had a bunch of targets against Tampa, too. Are you trusting this Everett and wanting to play him at 1.7 here?
I mean, everyone has a ton of targets for the Rams. It seems to happen every single week. Kupp still leads the league in targets. Woods and Cooks, I think, are still top 10, top 15. Everett's now up there with tight end targets the last 2 weeks. Going up against a tough San Francisco defense, I don't know if he's worth it. I don't know if I can trust him. I'd rather take a shot on Walker, on Cook. And if Andrews doesn't play, then Hurst isn't the worst idea in the world. But I don't know. It's tough to trust Everett in the target amounts, considering how much they've passed, and they're going up against the San Fran defense that's really good so far this season. So I don't know. I don't know if I can trust him. I think I'm probably not going to, just because. But if Brandon Cook misses, that could change a little bit.
All right. So what else do you like here at tight end?
Just Walker. I mean, you can go Disley, you can go Ertz. Both of them have 1.25x multipliers. Ertz, we obviously know that he's getting a ton of pass game work, and with Kittle likely being the chalk, a decent pivot is over to Ertz or Disley. Disley just continues to crush every single week because apparently he's the best tight end and most consistent tight end in the league since week one. Has actually, I think, outscored Kelsey most weeks so far this season, if I remember correctly. But both of them 1.25x multipliers, like both of them. But Kittle is just on another level. So for cash, I think we go Kittle, and it's just no argument.
All right, so there's two guys that I wanted to bring up here that I potentially will consider in both formats. And well, not really. I'm playing Kittle and cash, let's just be honest. But the Swamp, man, like we know I can't even think. Oshani is out. Yeah, like he's out. The Swamp, 2x multiplier. Going up here against New Orleans, we expect this game to have some scoring. Like, that's one of the guys, Grant, like, you know, we're looking for some tight end value. 4 or 5 catches there at 2x. I'm in.
Yeah, Swam's not the worst idea in the world. I don't mind that play at all. Like, there's a few tournament flyers you can take. If Vernus Davis out, Sprinkle crushed my heart or crushed my dreams last week, but still a 2x multiplier if he gets into the end zone, that's pretty big. Fells and Aiken, both 1.9x multiplier. KC has been getting crushed by the number 1 and 2 tight ends pretty much every single week. They have the highest target share to opposing tight ends in the league. They're kind of shutting down the outside, and this game's going to be a high-scoring, high-passing game. So I could see Fells or Aiken have one of their random 2-touchdown games. I mean, just look at Fells the last 3 weeks, 15 points, 1.7, 13 points. He's getting large amounts of red zone equity, and he may end up with it again. It's a long shot play, but if we're looking for big multipliers, I mean, what are the odds that they fail? Probably about the same as either Swan or as Sprinkle, which are the other 2x multipliers. And they have just as much, if not more, touchdown equity.
My other guy is Ricky Seals-Jones. He's 1.8x. Seattle's allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends this season. Ricky Seals-Jones is playing 30% of the snaps. Not playing a ton of snaps. The thing that I like about him over Harris is blocking. That's what he's playing 65% of the snaps. I think it's actually like 62. But he's just blocking. So I'm not going to play Harris at 2x when I can get the route running tight end Ricky Seals-Jones at 1.8. I know, pretty sure he goose egged last week
yes,
on Monday Night Football. So
he scored about the same as Baker.
Yeah, so I think he almost outscored Baker, right? Like, so
I'm real close.
So those are my cheaper guys. Let's throw Kittle in here. You have a preference for flex here? Do we want to go running back or do we want to go wide receiver for cash?
For cash, I'm slightly leaning running back just because we still got. I don't know if you put Gurley in or if you put Chubb in, but the other one Gurley is fine. Yeah, and so you can go Chubb or you can go Carson. I think I'm going a little bit more for floor with realistic upside with multipliers. Actually, on SuperDraft, Baker tied Ricky Seals-Jones for points this week.
Even better. We'll leave the flex spot open for you guys. I agree with Grant. I'd go running back. Let's build a tournament lineup here, and I feel like we're gonna build a game stack of Washington at Miami. Like that's where we're going here. Chat, if you guys YouTube or RotoGrinders chat want to see us build a game stack here on SuperDraft on the show, we'll take the one that you guys are posting about and build a game stack after we build a Washington at Miami game stack. Grant, this is by far my favorite game stack on SuperDraft this week. There's so many different ways to build a game stack here. This game has a 41 implied total, and on salary sites, like I'm probably not building. I'll build a couple game stacks of this game. I'll be like just being honest, but I'm going to have multiple game stacks of this game on SuperDraft this week. So we agree it's Case Keenum that we want to kind of build out of this stack, right?
Yep. Absolutely love Case so far this season. He's been putting up decent numbers outside of the one game versus I think New York where he got switched for Haskins early. I don't think that's going to happen again. Like 1.5x multiplier for a guy averaging over 20 points in games he's played the entire game. It's fantastic. We know exactly where he's going with the ball.
All right. Do we want to play Drake on this team at 1.75?
It depends. Do you want to go Parker Williams or do you want to go Drake Parker or Drake Williams?
What about all three?
I feel like that might be.
There's not enough touchdowns in this game for all three. So I agree with you. I think we go both wide receivers.
All right. Let's just go full out onslaught for the passing game here and go. I think McLovin's an absolute lock just because.
Yeah, so we got Keenum, Parker, Williams, McLaurin. I would be perfectly okay with playing Sprinkle or Davis, whoever plays, as like another pass catcher. I don't love Trey Quinn or Richardson on this site because it's half point PPR. But I think the tight ends are fine at their multipliers.
I mean, like I like Richardson. I do. We saw him get looks in the red zone when Case Keenum was in the lineup. Like Richardson's a big, lanky guy that can actually be like we saw Russell Wilson target him in the red zone for touchdowns quite often. We've seen him get targeted by Case Keenum. The reason he hasn't done anything the last 2 weeks is because it's been tough matchups or it's been just absolute trash quarterback play. And so Richardson, like first 3 weeks of the season, 5.6, 9.1, 18.3 points. If the first week he gets a touchdown, he makes 17 points with this multiplier here. So I'm honestly leaning towards Richardson over Sprinkle or Davis because Davis, like you're giving up so much equity instead of going with Ertz or Disley or what's his name, Kittle. One of those guys is going to end up with at least 20 points. And so the odds of Vernon Davis at 1.5x multiplier going for 20 points aren't great.
All right, so we'll play Richardson, full on onslaught of the passing game here. All right, we need some running backs, Grant. We talked about a lot of running backs that we like this week. Give me a running back, and then I'll plug in another one.
Trying to think, trying to go balls to the wall, but I don't think that's the right way to go. Let's go with Philip Lindsay, 1.45x multiplier. Going to be the lowest owned of the bunch, considering that Bell, Gurley, Carson are all in the same range. And 2 out of the last 3 weeks, 24-plus points. He can get that 100-yard rushing bonus. Like, everyone just pays attention to the first few games of the season. First 2 games were tough matchups to go against the run. Chicago and Oakland both are not great for opposing running backs. And Lindsey's a guy that can get 15 rushing attempts, and he's a guy that averaged over 5 yards rushing attempt last season. He may be splitting carries with Freeman, but has the ability, small guy that has the ability to break off for a big run, and he's gotten a lot of touchdown equity the last 3 weeks here. So Lindsey's a guy that I really like in tournaments.
All right, so we'll plug Lindsey in here. I'm going to plug Bell in too, just going right at it. So Lindsey, Bell, 1.45. I agree with you. I don't think this is a team that we have to go like 2x multipliers here. So I like how this team is shaping up. We'll leave tight end open. There's a bunch of different ways you can go at tight end that we talked about. Like, I don't even hate playing like a chalk George Kittle here. We're playing a Miami Washington stack. Like, we really don't have to worry too much about like ownership in this lineup, in my opinion. I think that Parker, Williams, McLaurin potentially get ownership here on SuperDraft, but I don't think it's going to be enough ownership that we have to be like super concerned about playing these guys with a chalk Bell or Kittle here.
Yeah, and I mean, even some chalks hit pretty much every single week. I mean, you look at last week, and Will Fuller was 25%, I believe, in tournaments. I'm actually going to look at last week winning lineup and see like kind of who was on the chalkier guys. Granted, the chalk hit super hard last week, but even still, you see chalky guys up at the top just because of the amount of edge you get with multipliers. You're going to see it every single week.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think Will Fuller was like 26%.
Yeah, which that's slightly over the field on, but I had him paired with Hopkins a lot, which crushed me.
Yeah, like Bridgewater was the guy last week. He was 3% owned. He put up 43.8. He was the guy that you kind of had to have. Aaron Jones was like 20% owned. Michael Thomas at 1.1 was only 10% owned. Will Fuller was 25 on the nose. So the big guys, the low owned guys, like Christian McCaffrey was on the winning team. Michael Thomas, Aaron Jones, Bridgewater, Jared Cook, Tate, and Fuller. Like even Tate at 2x last week at 44% was like he was the chalky wide receiver, and he was on the winning team. So the big guys were Jared Cook at 1.9, that 1.9% owned, just taking advantage of that 1.55 multiplier, and with him getting a touchdown.
Yeah, no, he just absolutely crushed, and so did Fuller. But yeah, getting him at 20% wasn't a bad move. But yeah, we don't have CMC on the slate, so just not having a guy that's going to be 30% owned, that's pretty much a lock for 30 points. One interesting thing is David Johnson was 53% owned last week. And so looking at guys that could potentially beat TJ like this week, I think that Le'Veon Bell is one of them that's going to go into the 40% range over on SuperDraft. So it doesn't make it the worst fade in the world going over to Lindsey, going over to Carson, going over to Gurley, considering how highly owned Bell is probably going to be.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about last week's lineup, too, it was more of a team stack instead of a game stack. It was a New Orleans team stack that ended up taking it down. And we've kind of seen this a little bit on SuperDraft where team stacks, when the multipliers are right, work. I'm sure the guy that won finished first, second, fifth. And I'm sure he had multiple stacks with Bridgewater, just looking at his top few lineups here. So let's just build an overall general tournament lineup here. Let's go ceiling type tournament lineup. We got about 5 or 6 minutes before we get out of here. If we run a little over, it's okay. I'm sure Devin just wants to go bowl or something. Tournament build, give me a quarterback. We've already kind of talked about everybody that we like and we don't like. Give me a quarterback that, you think the ceiling is there, with the multiplier and everything.
Let's go with Jared Goff. 1.4x multiplier. He's been putting up huge numbers. He's probably going to get the 300-yard passing bonus, which is worth essentially 3 points here instead of 2. And so, guy that has only had less than 20 points or 19 points once in the last 4 weeks, and is averaging just 300 yards a game. And they're probably going to be passing a lot.
So who do you want to pair him with in this one? I think we talked about Robert Woods potentially here. I think he's a guy that you could pair him at 1.5. I think Everett's another guy you could pair him at tight end. Touchdown at his multiplier would be interesting.
Yeah, I think you can do a double pair with Woods as the lock and load. And then if Cooks plays, I think it's Woods and Cooks. If Cooks doesn't play, it's Woods and Everett. So we can kind of go under the assumption that Cooks is not going to play and throw in Everett.
I like that. Let's do that. And we don't necessarily need to game stack it, but if Cooks plays, you put in Cooks, you can play Kittle. Again, like Kittle is just that tight end that I'm gonna be way overweight on. Running backs here, I'm gonna throw Kenyon Drake in here. We talked about him earlier. I really like Drake in general this week. Just volume alone against this terrible defense, and then 1.75x over here on SuperDraft. Is there another running back that you want to take that you feel like the ceiling is there with the multiplier?
We didn't really talk about much, but Ito Smith is at 1.8x. Got 6 targets last week, 6 receptions. We know that he can get a touchdown or 2, and they can use him in the end zone. They're going up against Arizona, so it's going to be a high-paced, high-scoring game. Ito Smith is a guy with a whole bunch of upside that's going to have 0 ownership in this.
He's your 2% owned guy this week that you're just hoping finds the paint. When you have a 1.8x multiplier, if you find the paint and you get 10 touches, you're likely going to put up 20. So 20 plus. I'm gonna throw in. We already kind of talked about it. You stole my thunder on him, but I'm gonna put in Crowder here at 2x multiplier. Darnold is coming back. Crowder, we talked about him when we were breaking down the wide receivers. Just absolutely the targets in week 1, and we really haven't seen this combo since. I kind of hope he flies under the radar here, and I don't think we see another 17 target game, but I'll be honest, it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah. And what do you think about if Watkins doesn't play, throwing in Pringle?
Oh yeah, like he's just, we didn't really talk about him in cash games, but like if Watkins doesn't play, like Pringle needs to be in your cash lineup over here, right?
Yeah, probably. I think so.
Like you think Tate last week, Tate didn't have a great game and put up 20 points.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely not a bad call.
And Tate doesn't have Patrick Mahomes throwing him the football. So I really
He
like
has a much worse version of Patrick Mahomes, like quite possibly the worst version of Patrick Mahomes.
That's right. So I really like how this team, just in general, looks like on paper, considering the multipliers. And the thing that I like about this team, Grant, is like I can easily take Goff and Woods and Everett out, and these are the ceiling type players that I can mix into some stacks here. And I don't know how much Ito Smith I will have, but I love the call. He's a guy that touchdowns, find the paint at 1.8, and you're looking good. So we'll leave flex open. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention here before we get out of here?
No, I think we pretty much covered all of it.
Yeah, there's nothing that I feel like that we didn't really talk about that I wanted to talk about. Again, on paper, like the Dallas passing game, I think a lot of people are going to be on the running game for Dallas this week. Maybe not even over here, but I think Gallup is kind of interesting at 1.3x. We didn't really talk about him, but the Jets corners are the worst corners in football. So like this would be a matchup, and you kind of have to take advantage of it, in my opinion. And like even Arizona facing Atlanta, their secondary has been terrible. So like these are the matchups in general that we want to target here. And if you haven't already, make sure you go listen to the Epic Early Week podcast. I heard Dean got some issues this week.
I mean, Dean just keeps losing our bets, and it makes me chuckle.
So I heard he wants to fight somebody. So we'll have to see on next week's Epic Pod how that all works out. But we're going to get out of here. If you haven't checked out SuperDraft, do it. There's no reason not to check out SuperDraft. It's an awesome site. It's very different. Have a ton of fun playing over there every week. It's a nice break from salary cap formats. So superdraft.io, promo code grinders, $10 once you deposit $10 or more over there. Take advantage of it. There's a bunch of stuff in the lobby, a ton of stuff. There's showdown slates. So he is G for 07. I am Stevie TPFL. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
See you, kids.